Okay, it is 11 o'clock, so I am going to get started. If anyone in the room can let me know if they cannot hear me or see my screen, then I can stop and get started again once we confirm it's all working. This webinar is being recorded. It will be shared with, we had actually far more professors request the recording than will be attending in person, but I am free to get started. So my name is Kevin Smith. I am the Director of Product Development for StockTrak, and I'm going to be talking about the new features that we're releasing for spring of 2023. This webinar is scheduled for 30 minutes. I'm hoping to take a little bit less time of your day than that, but we'll get going as soon as possible. So, big picture, this is the agenda of what I'm going to go through. First up is StockTrak 6. We have some updates to our cryptocurrency feeds, big updates for derivatives, options, spreads, and future options. We now support additional languages for all of our features. We have some backend improvements to our assignment system and some updates to our budgeting game as well. So let me jump straight into StockTrak 6. Now, if you use StockTrak this fall, you've already encountered most of what we call StockTrak 6. This means that it is the sixth major revision of StockTrak since we launched in 1990. So this has been a huge project. We're currently, I think, at month 14, and we're expecting it to basically finish in March at this point. What StockTrak 6 really means is that it's a complete revision of the user interface of StockTrak and a lot of the trading pits and how the mechanism of trades as well. So this fall we released most of the trading pits. This spring going in, you will notice that all of your professor reports have also been enhanced to the new look and feel. The biggest remaining pages that we're planning to release in the next couple of weeks include the create a class page for professors, which will have also an expedited class creation feature if you just want to use default settings. You don't really want to customize things too much, but also it will include the ability to copy your previous classes as well. And the student registration page is also the last major piece that is still outstanding, which we plan to release later this week. So it makes things a little bit more user-friendly, and from your students' perspectives, the biggest change for that will be that if they have used StockTrak in a previous class, it'll allow them to use the same login information for the next semester as well. They will still need to pay for the next class they're joining into, but they won't need to re-register from scratch. They'll be able to keep using their same login credentials, which reduces quite a bit of student confusion. So if I actually pull up StockTrak for a minute here, you can see it. This is my student dashboard. The StockTrak 6 pages, the navigation changes as well. So you can see at the top here, we have what we call the bigger menus, where they can access more of their portfolio from one place. They don't need to go from one page to another. It's all kind of right at the top in front of them. For professors, your administration menu is also on the side here, and so you'll be able to access that as well. And for the user interface, one of the biggest changes is that in the previous years, we've had kind of a stripped-down mobile version of our website for users coming on mobile devices. It would let them make trades, but not every trading pit was the same, and not every feature of the site was available. With StockTrak 6, the mobile version and the desktop version are identical. So there's nothing missing from the mobile version. Students get the same experience whether they're on their phone or on their computer. This is in addition to the mobile app that we released this past fall. So this past fall, there is now a StockTrak app in both the iPhone and the Android app stores, which students can download. But if students don't want to download the app, they still have a good user experience with this new version as well. So like I said, the last remaining pages are just some administration pages. If you experience any issues, then they will have some, you can always contact our support team with the live chat on the page. So I have a question that just came in. How can I see my students' positions by the amount of shares they have, or futures contracts, or amount of currency position they have? Right now I do the math by looking at the transactions and adding it up. So I can answer that right away. Let me log into my professor account. So basically what you're asking for, I believe, is your students' open positions. How can you actually see their portfolio instead of just looking at their transaction history and doing the math? So the way you would do that is in your administrator account, you go into reports, and you would look at, we actually call it the ranking report. This is where we have kind of all of the live stuff for a student's portfolio. In the rankings report, there's a button to view their portfolio, and this is where you can see their current holdings. So every symbol they have, the price they paid, the quantity they're holding, all that stuff. Actually, it looks like the quantity is not on this table, so I'm going to talk with our developers and have that added this week. So quantity will be a column on here next week. Making a note of that right now. That was on the old version, and it looks like we didn't include that with the new one, but it will be there next Tuesday, I believe, is when we have our next build of the site. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, that makes total sense. Also, if you do need the minimum maximum positions, this is one of the things that sometimes if you ask our support team, they can give you a report that pulls this information. I know there's a couple of professors that every semester they ask us every few weeks to just pull a list of their class and show their holdings based on some tournament rule they've had. So while that's not necessarily built into the site, our support team usually can provide that for you for the duration of your class if you need it. Next up, cryptocurrency feed enhancements. So in the previous semesters, we've had cryptocurrencies for a couple of years now, but due to restrictions in our data feed, we were basically executing orders based on the last price, which is not ideal for most investing situations. So our new feed that we're using does include the bid-ask on most coins. So now orders will be executing a bid-ask. This came up quite a bit. I would say most of the support tickets we would get from students involving cryptocurrencies would just be, some trade in the real world went through at some weird price, and our data feed picked up on that, and so a student would have gotten a weird price for a crypto they were trading. That will no longer be the case because we are using bid-ask, the same as we use for basically all of our securities other than cryptocurrencies. There are still a few coins that in our feed we just don't get the bid-ask. We're working on getting that as soon as we can, and those will continue to execute at last prices. But for the big ones, it's now working on bid-ask. Next up, so if you've been to these webinars in the past, or if you've been watching StockTrak over the last couple of years, you've noticed we've put a lot of emphasis on improving our personal finance resources. We've been working with a lot of schools talking about campus-wide financial literacy programs, things like that. But this spring, we actually went back and we've put a lot of time and effort into improving our derivatives trading, because I know that is very important to a lot of our existing professors. So the biggest change we have now is the option spreads pit has been rewritten from scratch. So this was another project. It has been going on for the entire fall semester and then last summer as well. So this is a very large revision to how we handle the options trading, option spreads trading. So I'm going to pull up the option spreads pit really quick so you can kind of see what we've done here. And in addition to just in the previous spread pit only supported a couple different spreads. Now we support over 2 dozen. We also have this set up to give students a little bit of guidance on what exactly they're doing too. So a description of what this spread is. And if you choose a different spread type, it tells you the different profit profiles you'd have based on what you're doing. When you pick your strike price, the trading pit kind of guides them through the process of what exactly they need to do to have a valid spread of this type. So all this stuff is now built in, and in addition to this being built into the spreads pit itself, actually let me pull this up and get something near the money. Do 150 and 155. So I have the quotes of all my legs and the volume and everything. So in addition to this being a much better tool for option spreads trading, especially for a student who's trying to figure this out for the first time, the entire way we calculate the margin requirements has been rewritten as well. So the old option spreads pit that we had, basically it only supported a handful of different spreads, and it kind of hard-coded the margin requirements for that spread. Now the margin requirements when students are trading options is dynamically calculated based on what they're trading now and their existing open positions. So that means that even if they're trying to trade a spread type that we don't necessarily have in this list, so for example, we don't currently have spreads where you have different expirations, but that can be done in the real world, they can still place those trades one leg at a time using the regular options pit, and their margin requirements and profit profiles will be maintained just like they would in the real world. So it's a complete rewrite from scratch. It's mostly on the back end, so if you really don't work with options, you won't notice much of a difference. But for students, matching this to what actually happens in the real world, it's a massive improvement over the previous system. So we're really excited to launch that for this semester. So yeah, like I mentioned, it's more than just a trading pit. It's really a from scratch enhancement to the system of options trading from begin with. We've also we actually, this is a kind of an ongoing project. We're putting a lot of time and effort into improving our futures and futures options as well. We've been doing a complete audit of all the futures in our system. There's been a lot of futures that have been in our system that one of the biggest problems with them is they might exist in the real world, but because there's so little volume, especially on the future options, that students would have a hard time actually getting the trades in. So the first thing that we did is we put the tutorial video for the trading of the futures and future options right on the trading pit to kind of walk students through what's going on here. We're adding new contracts like Eris Future Race options. We've never had them in the past, but we're adding them as of I think next week or the week after. And in the future options, we're updating the list of what's going to be available. So, like I said, just because the future option exists doesn't mean anybody is trading the real world, and that's been very frustrating for students. So we're going to try to pare down that list to get it to where if a student wants to trade something, they'll be able to find the future options and get their order to execute right away. Otherwise, we're going to be doing more and more enhancements to the trading pits themselves to make it a little bit easier for students who are trying to do this the first time. Out of everything we have on StockTrak, the future and future options pit are the ones that there's kind of the biggest learning curve for a first-time student, where the gap between the class theory and actually building the portfolio tends to be pretty wide. So the tutorial videos are a start. We're going to be building in some walkthroughs and tutorials like on-site pop-ups to walk them through what they're trying to accomplish. And we have the live chat with our support team on both of these trading pits as well, so students can ask questions at any time. I actually forgot to include it on this presentation, but along with our other derivatives improvements, we also did a lot of enhancements to our Forex trading over the fall semester, which we launched for the spring. The biggest changes of Forex trading, it's kind of a back-end change, but the market value calculations are more reflective of the real world, where that was a little bit off in the past, and it was causing some issues with students' portfolio evaluations. But that is now resolved, and the Forex trading pit, just like the other ones, has been updated to the new StockTrak 6 version, where students can have a lot better user experience dealing with Forex on their phones as well. So next up, we have additional languages. So if you use StockTrak 8 or 9 years ago, you might have noticed that we had Spanish at one time and we eventually dropped support. We have re-implemented Spanish support along with French as well, both for schools with a large Spanish-speaking population, but also we work with quite a few schools in Quebec and France. So both of those have translations. These are AI-powered translations of the entire site, which means it's not just the trading pits. If you're including any of our lessons, like our written content, those are translated as well. Our quotes and research tool is translated top to bottom. The only thing that's not included in this is the tutorial videos that are part, like the tutorial walkthroughs. So we are working on that over the course of this semester, kind of back and forth of what we're going to do, complete new tutorials in those languages, or if we're going to be adding closed captions, or what we're going to do for those. But it's more of a boon to students who are already working in a second language to get a better feel for the site and how to build their portfolio when it comes to doing it in the real world. The last major enhancement is a back-end enhancement again to our assignment system. So professors who've used our assignment system in the past, this last fall, there's been some speed issues where especially early in the morning when the market opens, the assignment system was running a little bit slower than we would have liked. We've separated this out, so now the assignments engine is running on its own dedicated system. It's not sharing resources with the portfolio simulation anymore, which means that even at peak trading times, the assignments system is running at full capacity. So hopefully this is going to resolve any issues we had with reliability in the past, again, especially during the peak hours, like from 9:30 till about 10 o'clock in the morning. Ideally, most professors won't notice any change at all. I have another question here. Last semester, assignments and grading had issues. It only averaged the assigned components that a student attempted, not everything assigned. Is there more control over how the grading is done and reported in the new version? So we have not actually changed anything with the grading, and what I believe you're talking about is two different parts on our end. So one of them is, as the professor, you have the option to choose whether or not your students can retry different assignments. Let me pull up the assignments creation page here to give you a reference of what I'm talking about. Basically, when you assign like an article or any of the lessons, there's this checkbox for allow retries. So if you don't check this, the first attempt that your students make is just going to be what's graded. No matter what they do afterwards, they get one try. If you do check this, they can retry as many times as they want, and the grade you're going to see in a report will be their last attempt. There may have been an issue where the students' grade on your report was the average of their attempts instead of their last attempt. That is resolved. And I will double check that after this call just to make sure. The parts that have questions answered. So if I go to my report card, the completion here versus the score here. This is the second part that I was about to talk about. The score here is only looking at the items that had a quiz on it, which is inconsistent when teachers have tasks that have, like trading tasks or watching a tutorial video that doesn't have a grade. Those were counted, they just weren't counted in the score at all. And so you'd get a disconnect between what the completion was and what the score was for a student. That is something that we are working on during this semester, is changing this calculation. It's kind of a preview for what we're looking for this coming fall, but eventually we wanted to have LMS integration where you could transfer your gradebooks directly from StockTrak into the LMS systems. And so we're changing the way that we're doing the scoring to be a little bit more consistent with like how Blackboard or how Canvas or some of the other LMS systems do their grading. So that part hasn't changed yet. Yeah, the quiz score, ignore quizzes that were not attempted. That is exactly what I'm talking about, where if you didn't have a score at all, it was not counting in this. That is still an issue right now. We plan to have that released before the end of this semester, and it will be backwards compatible. So if the student didn't attempt it, I'm hoping in the middle of March, but it could be as late as early April, the score will reflect, the score they have here will be overall what they did, weighted towards the grades they get on the quizzes. So yeah, I know what you're talking about, and yes, that is something we're working on right now, but it has not been resolved yet. So we'll send out an update to professors as soon as we have resolved that issue as well. The last major change that we've made to our system, this one actually has related to our personal finance resources and our budgeting game. If you haven't seen our budgeting game already, I highly recommend that you try it. Even if you don't teach personal finance, we would love to connect with other professors in your school that do. But in the budgeting game, users earn a paycheck at the end of their pay period. And we always had the budgeting game set up so the students start work, quote unquote, on the first Monday of the game. And so if you're a full-time worker, you'd get your paycheck 2 weeks after you start work. And so in this case, you see here, I started December on a Thursday, so I would start work Monday. I wouldn't get my first paycheck to the 16th. And so this was causing a lot of issues with students where they would end up falling deep into debt at the very beginning of the game, which kind of was discouraging and not necessarily how it works in the real world. And so we've changed this so now the paychecks are based on what the first Monday would be of the first week that you have. So in this case, I would get my first paycheck on the 9th instead. It does help quite a bit for students right at the beginning of the game to just make it a little bit more consistent with, you're going to get your paycheck at the same time every month. And last, just a quick preview of the stuff that's coming up soon. Another update to the budgeting game. Right now, students have all kinds of purchasing decisions, but they can't really see them later unless they look at their bank statements. What we're doing is we're adding a graphical interface to their transactions. So as they buy stuff for their home, it actually will appear in their apartment. They can see it later. And they can also compare their apartments with other students in their class from the rankings page. So it's kind of a more tangible feedback of here's what you did and here's what it looks like and how you're building up your not just your net worth but your quality of life over time.
In the budgeting game, we're also adding some end-of-month and end-of-game summaries to give students better feedback of how well they've managed their finances. We're adding some comparison shopping mini games. Those are all related to the budget game. We actually have implemented these on our high school site already, some of these, but we're adding to the university version shortly. And the last one is again for the investment simulation, where the first time a student comes in, they basically come to an empty portfolio. And the most common question we get from students who are reaching out to a support team just starting is, what do I do now? How do I choose my first stock? And yeah, we can talk all day about building evaluation models and doing the research, but they just want to know what stock should I start looking at to build out my research from there. And so we're coming up with a suggested stocks list based on the top 500 most commonly traded stocks of other students. Hopefully just to get students up and going. So that's all the new stuff. Now, before we adjourn, we still have a few minutes if anybody has any questions.